Hi guys. As usual, I didn't want to be on camera, so instead I'm going to let you stare deep into the eye of Cthulhu. Today, I made something out of polymer clay. Something that I have not done very often. I have dabbled a little bit. I've made food in the past, but this is my first sculpture and my first time covering a box with polymer clay. And I will tell you what I'm doing step by step, but you may want to watch more of a professional if you're actually trying to learn how to do this correctly. Anyway, without further dudes, here is my polymer clay experiment. This box comes from Dollar Tree. I'm going to use it as my base today. And I'm making this as a Christmas gift, or I did, because it's after Christmas now, but I made this as a Christmas gift for my boyfriend to keep his dice for Dungeons and Dragons. And so I did sand it a little bit, and then I'm going to remove the hardware, but I did trace where the hardware was so that I can avoid those areas when I'm putting clay on the box. So I rolled this out with my pasta machine. Yes, I do have a pasta machine for clay, even though I don't clay that often. I'm one of those crafters where I'm like, I'm going to try a new hobby, so I'm going to buy all the things that you use for that hobby, and then I don't use them. Oh yeah, so I'm supposed to tell you what I'm doing. So I took some Sculpey, I'm going to call it Bacon Bond, but I think they changed the name. Maybe it's just clay adhesive now, and stuck it on the box. It's like clay glue, and that will keep the clay stuck to the box. And then I'm using this clay cutter to cut away the areas where the hinges go. So to find the right spot, I just kind of lifted it up and peeked under there to look for the lines that I drew and cut around it. For the front hardware, because it's more ornate, I cut away the clay like I did on the back, but I then am using the actual hardware as like a cookie cutter to make sure that I get the exact right shape. Now, I decided to bevel the edges because I was thinking that would save clay and also, you know, save on like baking time or make sure it baked evenly. I don't know if it really looks the greatest, but this is going to be a treasure chest that may have, have been under the ocean for a long time. So if it's a little wonky, it doesn't really matter that much. And then I'm adding some texture to make it look like wood grain. So I'm using a clay tool to just go over it lightly first with some thin lines. And then I'm going back in and being a little more aggressive and making some deeper lines to try to mimic wood grain texture. Also, by the way, I am using Sculpey Original for this base part. Now I'm going to cut some strips out of my clay so that I can make those metal straps that you see around like pirate treasure chests. And to get that to stick to the cured clay, I'm going to go ahead and use the Sculpey Bacon Bond again. To make the rivets, I'm using a clay extruder. Yet another purchase I made for a hobby that I barely do. I did that to get my snakes of clay tiny enough that I could then cut off little chunks that are fairly even and roll them into balls, and then I just smush them on. Now I'm going to make handles for the sides of the chest. So I'm going to cut 2 equal rectangle shapes as my base. And then I'm taking some of that snake and I'm going to make a couple of circles that are going to be my handles. So I just kind of roll it up to get an idea of the length I need, and then I'm going to cut 2 pieces of that same length, and then I join them together into a circle like so. Just in case I'm using the Bacon Bond, Sculpey does stick pretty well to itself, but I wanted to make sure the handles aren't going to fall off. And cut a tiny rectangle, and I'm going to use that to go across the handle that I just stuck down. and then use the Bacon Bond to attach them to the box. Now I'm going to switch over to some lightweight Sculpey because I'm going to put an octopus on the top of this box, and I want to make sure that it's not so heavy that when you open the box it's top heavy and falls over. So that first shape you saw me make there is supposed to be the head, but it turns out it's way too small, so just ignore that for now because I'll remake it later. And I'm taking another ball of clay and I'm going to flatten it into a circle. I'm going to use this later as like the apron, that I guess you'd call it, between the head of the octopus and the tentacles. And then I rolled 4 balls of clay into about equal size, and I'm cutting them in half, and I'm going to use those to make the 8 tentacles. And to do that, I'm going to roll the clay between my blocks and put more pressure on one side so that it gets skinnier and turns into a tentacle shape. I'm doing the same process as I did for the rivets, except this time these are going to be the little suction cup thingies that are on the tentacles. And I'm using a dotting tool to press the balls into the tentacle. Now, to make sure that my octopus is going to be sitting correctly on the box, I'm going to put the back hinges on temporarily. And then I'm going to use my Bacon Bond to stick down my tentacles. And I'm just going to mash it down in the middle to make sure that it's really stuck to the top of the box. And to get my tentacles on there, I'm just using the Bacon Bond like glue. So I'll put it either on the box or on the tentacle itself and kind of like twist them up into the shapes that I think look pretty. By the way, when I was using those acrylic blocks earlier, I had to put some cornstarch on them because my clay was sticking to them really badly. So if anybody's familiar with clay or using those kind of blocks for clay, can you tell me if I did something wrong? I don't know if it was the clay or if it was the blocks or something I'm doing, but they got really sticky and I had a really hard time using them unless I put cornstarch on them. So I don't know what the heck I did. So if you know what it was, let me know. So once all my tentacles are on, I'm just going around with a paintbrush and smoothing out any of the liquid Sculpey clay stuff that might have squeezed out. And then I'm going to cut through the tentacles where the split is in the box, because obviously if I didn't do that, we couldn't open the box. Now I'm going to take that apron that I made earlier and stick it on top of the tentacles. Also, by the way, I didn't just like to miraculously know how to make an octopus. I did watch like 3 or 4 tutorials on YouTube, and basically all of them had the same process for making an octopus. So this is not my original idea. So then you just smooth the apron into the tentacles. So I'm using a combination of different silicone tipped clay tools and my fingers to get it nice and smooth. And it does take forever, so I just skipped to where it's all nice and smooth. And then here is where I realized that my head is way too teeny tiny for this size of octopus body. So I'm adding some more clay to it to make it larger. And then I'm attaching it again with a little bit of Bacon Bond, and I'll do the same process of smoothing the clay into the bottom. And I just put some Bacon Bond over the seam as well to kind of help melt the clay together and hide the seam a little bit. Here I'm putting some like vents or something. I don't know what they are. They're like in the side of the octopus. I don't know if it has ears or if it breathes through there. I have no idea, but I stuck them on there. I don't know if they're right, but they look cool, so. And then I'm using a larger ball stylus to make eye holes, and then I stuck 2 balls of clay inside those holes for the eyes. And then I'm going to add some eyelids to the eyes so they blend into the body a little bit better. To make the octopus looking eyes, I did a little dot in the center of each eye, and then I'm using this Dental Explorer tool to make a line through the dot. So it gives that weird like slit sort of look that octopus eyes have. Now I'm going to line the box with this velvet. So I cut out 2 pieces that fit in the bottom of the bottom and the top of the box, but they're a little bit smaller so that it leaves room for the fabric. And before I put in the fabric, I'm going to add some paint into the bottom so that if there's any gaps in the fabric, it'll just be green and you won't see raw wood. So I'm going to use Fabri-Tac for this. So I'm going to attach that to the velvet, and then I'm going to trim it around so there's not too much bulk of fabric. So I'm trimming it a little closer to the shape. For the side fabric, I'm going to use the Fabri-Tac again, and I smooth it out with my finger just to make sure that the fabric lays nice and flat and isn't lumpy. And I just go ahead and stick that down. And to get them nicely into the corner, I just use a pair of tweezers to like mush it down. And then we have a nicely velvet lined box. So any little extras I'm just trimming off using some fabric scissors. And then I'm going to take a nail file to it because I want to get any like glue that was sticking out off now that it's dry, because I want to make sure it's nice and smooth and closes correctly. So before I paint, I need to put a base coat on, so I used black gesso for that. I'm going to paint my treasure chest, and I mixed 2 different shades of brown acrylic paint together for that, and I'll go over all the parts that need to be wood. And I wasn't super neat about it, so I'm going back in just to touch up the spots that are not supposed to be brown. And then I'll use my gold paint to paint all of the metal hardware parts of the treasure chest. Now I'm going to take a black wash to go over the whole thing. This is the Black Magic Craft recipe. I use it all the time. As I always say, if you want to know how it's made, look up his recipe. And then you just blot off any excess. And once it dries, you get this cool aged effect on your piece. And then I also went over and painted the tentacles with black again because they got a little brown too. These are the metallics I'm using for the octopus. And look, it's painted. So I didn't want to bore you with the whole process of painting. So as you can see, I used the green on top and then went to a dark purple and then the light purple. But I do want to make those colors look more like they belong together. So I'm using my dotting tool to make dots of the colors on top of each other so that there's more of a transition. So I'm going to use the dark purple on the green, and then later I'll use the green on the dark purple, etc. I'm also using the dark purple and then later some of the light purple to make blobs and dots on the octopus's head, so he has a little bit more interest and it kind of fakes like I know how to paint. And then I'm painting the eyes gold. I'm just painting the entire thing gold for the moment, and then I'll set that aside to dry and I'll go back to it a little bit later. While it's drying, I'm going to reattach the hardware, and I'm putting on some E6000 glue first before I put it back on, just to make sure that it's really secure and isn't going to come off. Taking the screws out kind of messes with the integrity of the hardware. And so because I am new at this, I had a little mishap here, and I couldn't open the box because of the tentacles, so I ended up having to cut some of the clay away in order for it to be able to open. Doesn't look the best, but it is what it is. Everyone makes mistakes. Now I know for next time. Now I'm going to go back to the eyes, and I'm using some black gesso to go inside of those indents that I made earlier so that it makes those slits more noticeable. And then I'm taking my dotting tool, the really tiny side of the dotting tool, and I'm putting some black dots all around the edges of that as well to kind of blend it in and give like a creepy little sort of look to the eyeballs. And then I had this Sculpey gloss. It's, like a top coat. So I'm going to go over the entire thing. Well, not the entire thing, just the octopus with that. And then I'm going to use some UV resin on the eyes so that will fill in those holes and also make them nice and shiny. So I'm fairly proud of myself. It was a learning experience. Obviously, those cuts there in the back don't look the best, but most of the time people aren't going to be looking at the back. There was also some areas where things got smushed or moved around as I was sculpting. So, stuff happens, but I learned a little bit about making clay sculptures. So hopefully the next time I attempt this, I won't make as many mistakes. But my boyfriend seemed pretty happy with it, and his dice fit nicely in there. So I'll call that a win. And maybe someday when I learn a little bit more about clay sculpting, I can make him a new one that's a little bit better. But anywho, I hope you enjoyed. Comment below, let me know what you think. Let me know how you doing. I like to chit chat with you guys. And I will see you soon with another project. Probably something random again. That's how I do. Make sure that you find some time to waste some talent. And as always, I hope that you're happy and healthy and safe. And remember to be excellent to each other. Bye.